The morning sun was rising slowly over the wide military airbase. The sky was clear and a warm wind moved across the runway. Fighters sat quietly under the sunlight, waiting for training to begin. Young cadets in blue uniforms walked with energy and confidence. They were laughing, talking, and showing off like they owned the airfield. For them, this was a normal day, but this day, something special was about to happen. At the far gate of the base, the guards noticed a man walking toward the runway. He was moving slowly, step by step, like every memory in his life was carried in those old legs. His hair was white, his face was full of lines, and his back was a little bent. He wore a simple jacket, holding an old pilot helmet in his hand. The guards stared at him, wondering who he was. He did not look like a soldier now. He did not look strong. He did not look young. But he walked as if he knew every inch of this place. The cadets saw him coming and stopped laughing. One of them whispered, "Hey, who is that?" Another said, "Maybe someone's grandfather got lost." A third cadet joked, "Did he come here to fly planes?" "He can't even run!" They all laughed, but the old man didn't look at them. He just kept walking with calm eyes and a quiet face. There was something strong about him. Something hidden. Something heavy that the young cadets could not see. Near the main office stood Captain Reed, tall, confident, and proud of his position. The cadets respected him, and he enjoyed being the leader. He saw the old man and smiled in a disrespectful way. "Look at that," the captain said loudly so everyone could hear. "An old man walking into a fighter base. Maybe he wants to fly." The cadets laughed again, but the old man just kept moving forward. He reached the center of the runway and looked up at the fighter jets parked in a line. And then, his eyes stopped on one aircraft, the A-10 Thunderbolt II. It was silent, resting under the sun. Its huge engines were still. The smell of fuel and metal filled the air. The A-10 looked like a sleeping beast, strong, dangerous, and waiting for someone brave enough to wake it. The old man stared at it the way a warrior looks at his sword. The cadets noticed him staring, and that made them laugh harder. One said, "Maybe he thinks the jet will start itself." Another added, "Someone take a picture! This is funny!" But something was strange. The old man was not confused. He was not afraid. He was not lost. He looked like someone coming home. Captain Reed started walking toward him. His voice was loud and sharp. "Hey, old man! This is a restricted area. What are you doing here?" The old man slowly turned his head. His eyes were calm, deep, heavy with memories. He did not look angry. He did not look scared. He simply said, "I used to fly here." The cadets stared. The captain laughed. "You? Fly? These jets need real pilots. Young pilots. Strong pilots. Not someone who looks ready for a hospital bed." The cadets laughed again. But the old man still stayed silent. "Did you hear me?" The captain said. "This is a military base, not a museum for old heroes." The old man finally spoke again, and his voice was low and steady. "I am not here for your permission." Those simple words made the cadets go quiet for a second. It didn't sound like a joke anymore. His voice had a power they did not expect. The captain crossed his arms. "Oh, really? What do you want then?" The old man looked at the A-10 again. "That aircraft," he said softly, "used to know my hands." The cadets stared, confused. How can a plane know someone? They had no idea what his words truly meant. One young cadet tried to impress his captain. He shouted, "Sir, maybe we should let him try. Let's see if he can even sit inside the cockpit without breaking his back." Everyone laughed again. But now the old man's eyes changed. Not angry, not sad, but sharp, like someone waking up after a long sleep. Captain Reed smirked. "Fine, old man. If you think you are a pilot, go on. Try to start the A-10. Let's see what happens." He said it as a joke. He said it to embarrass him. He said it to make the cadets laugh even more. This was the moment. The trap, the joke, but instead of fear, the old man smiled, a quiet, confident smile. He stepped toward the aircraft, slowly, with respect, like someone approaching a loyal friend after many years. The cadets watched with wide eyes. No one was laughing now. The old man placed his hand on the cold metal body of the A-10. His fingers moved over it like a memory, like something he had missed. His eyes softened. He whispered something no one could hear. Maybe a name, maybe a memory. The air felt different. The runway felt silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. The cadets looked at the captain. The captain crossed his arms confidently. "Go ahead," the captain said. "Start it if you can." The old man put on his old flight helmet. It looked dusty and worn, but it fit his head perfectly, like it had never been removed. Then, with one slow breath, he climbed onto the aircraft ladder. To everyone's shock, he moved smoothly, easily, like he had done it 1,000 times. The jokes in the cadets' mouths froze. He was old, yes, but his hands, his steps, his balance, they were not weak. He lowered himself into the cockpit. The seat hugged him like it recognized him. The veteran looked around, seeing every switch, every button, every screen. His eyes were not confused. They were confident. The cadets stared in complete silence. Was this real? Was he really going to try? Then the whispers began. Wait, how does he know those controls? He looked too old. But he moves like a real pilot. Is he actually going to start it? The camera would zoom in. The music would rise. Suspense would grow. The old man placed his hands on the controls, and for the first time that morning, he looked alive, not old, not weak, not forgotten. Alive. Something powerful was about to happen, and no one on that runway was ready for it. The airbase was silent now. Every cadet, every young pilot in training, every mechanic standing nearby, all of them stared at the old man sitting inside the cockpit. Moments ago, they were laughing. Now, they didn't know what to think. Captain Reed was still confident. He stood with his arms crossed, trying to look calm, strong, and in control. But deep inside, a small voice in his mind whispered, "What if this old man really knows what he's doing?" He shook that thought away. It was impossible. No old veteran could start a modern A-10, not after so many years. Captain Reed raised his voice loudly so the cadets would hear. "Relax, everyone. He is just warming the seat. Soon he will come out tired, and we will carry him to a chair." A few cadets laughed, but their smiles were weak now. Something about the old man felt different. Something strong. Something dangerous. The veteran sat quietly inside the cockpit. His eyes moved slowly over the controls. His fingers touched the buttons gently, like a musician meeting his instrument after a long time. Dust covered some parts, but he knew exactly where everything was. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He didn't shake. It was like muscle memory was waking up inside him. Captain Reed took a few steps closer and shouted, "Sir! Are you sleeping in there? Do you need help? Maybe a pillow?" He laughed at his own joke. This time, no one laughed with him. The old man did not answer. Instead, he began checking switches. Click, click, click. Each sound echoed across the silent runway. The cadets started whispering. Why is he pressing those switches in the right order? How does he know the startup sequence? He's not touching random buttons. He looks like a real pilot. Captain Reed heard them and felt irritated. He yelled, "It doesn't matter what he touches. The engines will never start. He's too old to remember anything." But there was something Reed didn't know. Inside the cockpit, the veteran wasn't just remembering. He was reliving. He remembered every training flight, every mission, every moment he trusted this aircraft with his life. His breathing became deep and controlled. His hands relaxed into their natural position. His eyes sharpened, filled with focus and fire. He flipped the master power switch. Inside the cockpit, the screens began to glow faint green. It was small, but it was real. The cadets gasped. One of them whispered, "Sir." The screens just turned on. Captain Reed tried to hide his surprise. "It's probably just the backup battery," he said quickly. But his voice sounded unsure. The veteran continued, moving his hands confidently. He checked fuel levels, sensors, and engine systems. Every movement was precise, like the aircraft was an extension of his own body. Then he stopped. Slowly, he placed his hand on the throttle. The cadets held their breath. Captain Reed felt a strange chill run down his back. He shouted louder this time, "Stop! You don't have permission to start that aircraft." The old man finally spoke, his voice calm, cold, and powerful. "You gave me permission, Captain. Remember?" Everyone turned to look at Reed. He said nothing. "Because he did give permission." He said it like a joke, but the veteran was taking it seriously. The old man looked forward again. He flipped the ignition sequence. Inside the cockpit, warning lights blinked as the system prepared. The A-10 was waking up slowly, like a giant machine stretching its wings after a long sleep. A small vibration shook the aircraft frame. The cadets stepped back. One whispered, Is that the engine starting?" Captain Reed shouted, "Impossible! He can't!" But his voice was shaking now. The veteran watched the instruments closely. His eyes were calm, trained, and sharp. He pushed the throttle slightly and then, whoom, 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 the engine fans began turning. Dust swirled on the runway. The ground trembled lightly. The air filled with a deep metallic sound. The cadets stared with wide eyes. It's alive," one cadet whispered. Captain Reed's face turned red. It's alive," one cadet whispered. Captain Reed's face turned red. Captain Reed's face turned red. He shouted again, "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" But the veteran did not stop. He adjusted the throttle with steady control. The engine's sound grew louder, deeper, richer. The A-10's heart was beating again. Inside the base, mechanics, officers, and workers started running toward the sound. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, but the veteran didn't see them. He only saw the cockpit. He only heard the engine. He was in another world. A world where he was young again, flying through smoke, cloud, danger, and fire. A world where his skills saved lives. A world where he was respected and feared. Captain Reed looked trapped. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't admit the old man had succeeded. His pride was too big for that. So he tried to make one last joke. He shouted, "Okay, old man, you got lucky. Maybe the jet is starting itself because it feels sorry for you." Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. The cadets were not looking at the captain anymore. They were watching the veteran. The old pilot placed both hands on the controls. He looked calm, professional, and powerful. Without looking out, he said 3 quiet words. "I am not done." The cadets felt the words like thunder. They didn't know his story. They didn't know his past. But they knew one thing now. He was not a joke. He was not weak. He was not finished. In that moment, the engine sound grew louder. So loud that it reached the command building at the other end of the base. Inside, a senior officer, the colonel, looked up sharply from his desk. His eyes narrowed. He knew that sound, that deep, powerful roar. That was not a test. That was not training. Someone had started the A-10, and only a real pilot could do that. His chair rolled back as he stood up fast. He walked quickly toward the door. Outside, the young cadets were frozen in place. The runway shook. The engines roared. The old man looked unstoppable. Because the colonel is coming. And when he sees who is sitting inside that aircraft, everything will change. The A-10's engines were now rumbling like a storm waking up under the metal skin of the aircraft. Dust and hot air pushed across the runway, sending small stones rolling and jackets flapping. Every cadet stood frozen. Some covered their ears. Others stared with round eyes. But all of them felt the same thing: fear and respect. Inside the cockpit, the veteran was calm. His heartbeat was steady, his breathing deep and controlled. The glass in front of him reflected a face that looked old, but his eyes were young, sharp, and full of life. He moved his hands over the controls again. He checked fuel lines, sensors, throttle pressure, wing flaps, and the HUD display. Every movement looked smooth. Not 1 second of hesitation. Down below, Captain Reed was losing control of the situation. He pointed up at the jet and shouted to the cadets, "Someone pull him out! Now! Before he breaks something!" But no cadet moved. They didn't want to get close to the moving aircraft. They didn't want to interrupt a real pilot. And deep inside, they wanted to see what would happen next. One cadet whispered, "Sir, the aircraft is responding to him. He really knows what he's doing." Another said, "Maybe he was a real pilot, a famous one." Captain Reed turned red with anger. "Stop talking. He is just pretending." But the truth was right in front of them. Engines don't pretend. Systems don't follow orders from a confused man. A fighter jet doesn't wake up for a joke. The aircraft only listened to pilots, and it was listening to this old veteran. Inside the cockpit, the veteran slowly lowered the canopy. The thick glass came down with a heavy click, sealing him inside. The sound echoed across the runway. The cadets gasped. One said, "He's not just testing it. He's preparing to move it." The veteran placed his hand on the throttle. He didn't push it forward yet. He just rested his hand on it gently, like he was feeling its pulse. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't smile. He was focused. He whispered softly, "Good to see you again." The aircraft vibrated harder, like it responded to his voice. Captain Reed finally lost control. "Turn it off!" he screamed. "Get him out of there! This is an order!" Still, no one moved, because everyone could see the truth. Captain Reed was scared. Not scared of the aircraft. Scared of being wrong. Scared of the old man proving something powerful. Inside the control tower, officers stared through binoculars. Mechanics ran toward the runway. A group of senior officials rushed outside to see what was happening. The base was coming alive with confusion and shock, but the veteran did not look at any of them. He placed one finger on the radio switch. He turned it on. Static filled the cockpit. Then a weak sound from the tower came through. "Identify yourself. Identify yourself." The veteran pressed the mic and said just 2 words. Thunder 1. Silence. The entire radio channel went silent. Every officer, every controller, every mechanic froze. Those 2 words were not random. Thunder 1 was not a nickname. It was a call sign. A call sign that belonged to a pilot who was once a legend. A call sign that many believed was gone. Down on the runway, the cadets looked at each other. "Thunder 1? A cadet whispered. "That's not possible." "That means he—" They didn't finish the sentence, because they already knew. Captain Reed stepped backward, his face pale. Even he knew that name. Every pilot knew that name. Thunder 1 was the nickname of a pilot who completed missions that others called impossible. A pilot who saved soldiers on the ground when all hope was lost. A pilot who flew the A-10 like it was part of his soul. And now he was sitting right there, inside the jet. Alive. Returning. The veteran continued working, slowly and carefully. He ran weapon diagnostics, checked pressure levels, and tested the joystick. Everything responded perfectly. His eyes softened again. He wasn't flying yet, but his spirit was already in the sky. Suddenly the radio crackled. The voice of the colonel came through, cold, sharp, and full of authority. "Who is inside?" "That aircraft? Identify immediately." The veteran pressed the mic again. He spoke with calm confidence. "This is Thunder 1. Systems are live, engines stable." Inside the control room, officers stared at the radio in shock. Engineers looked at each other with wide eyes. The colonel stopped walking. Thunder 1. A voice from the past, a voice nobody expected to hear again. On the runway, the cadets were whispering like scared children. "That's impossible. He retired years ago. I thought he was gone." Captain Reed tried to regain control. He walked right to the aircraft standing in front of it. He shouted, "Stop this right now. I am ordering you to shut it down." But the veteran didn't move. He didn't look at Reed. He didn't hear his voice. He was somewhere else, inside. The skies, inside old memories, inside missions no one could imagine. He placed his hand firmly on the throttle now. Just a little push, and the aircraft would start rolling. The cadets stood behind Reed, waiting. Their hearts were beating fast, their breath shaking. Captain Reed shouted louder, voice cracking, "You can't fly that. You don't have permission." The veteran finally turned his head slightly. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just said one quiet sentence. "I don't need your permission. I earned my wings long before you were born." Reed stepped back like someone pushed him. The engines roared louder. Heat waves shimmered across the runway. Dust spun into the air. The A-10 looked like a living creature again, awake, angry, and ready to move. And then footsteps were heard. Fast, heavy footsteps. The cadets turned their heads. The colonel was marching toward the jet, his face red with shock and confusion. Everyone stepped aside. No one dared to speak. The colonel stopped right in front of the aircraft, staring at the veteran through the canopy. For a long moment, no one moved. The veteran looked down. The colonel looked up. 2 men. 2 soldiers. 2 histories meeting again. The cadets watched in complete silence. The engines kept roaring. Something big was coming, and nothing on that runway would ever be the same again. The colonel stood in front of the A-10, his boots shaking on the ground as the engines thundered louder and louder. The hot air pushed against his uniform. Dust spun in circles around his legs. Still, he did not move. He looked up at the old veteran through the glass canopy. At first, his face was full of shock. Then, it changed. He knew those eyes. Those were not the eyes of a confused old man. Those were the eyes of a soldier who had seen war, a pilot who once saved lives, a hero who never asked for medals. The colonel raised his hand slowly and spoke through the radio. "Thunder 1. Is that really you?" Inside the cockpit, the veteran nodded once. No words needed. The colonel understood. Around them, the cadets watched silently. The jokes were gone. The laughing was gone. Now there was only respect. and silence. Captain Reed stepped back. His face looked small now. Not proud, not strong. He had spent the morning trying to embarrass a man he didn't understand. And now, he felt something heavy in his chest. Shame. The veteran slowly powered down the aircraft. The engines softened, then quieted. The A-10 let out one last deep breath of heat and smoke, like a dragon returning to sleep. The canopy opened with a heavy click. The old veteran climbed out step by step. His legs were slow, but steady. His hands did not shake. Every cadet stood straight. Not because anyone told them to, but because something inside whispered, "Stand. This is a man who earned your respect." When the veteran reached the ground, the colonel walked toward him. His boots echoed across the silent runway. The two men stood face to face. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the colonel saluted, sharp, proud, and full of honor. The cadet's eyes widened. A colonel saluting an old man? But the veteran returned the salute, slow and respectful. "Welcome home, Thunder One," the colonel said softly. The veteran gave a small smile. "I only wanted to hear her heart again." "You didn't just hear it," the colonel replied. "You made her roar." Behind them, the cadets stood silently. Their faces no longer carried arrogance, only admiration. One cadet whispered, "Sir." "Who is he?" The colonel turned to them. "This man flew missions no one else could. When soldiers on the ground were trapped, he came from the sky. When others were afraid to fly, he went anyway. He saved lives, many lives." The old man lowered his eyes. He didn't like praise. He didn't need it. He just looked at the A-10 with quiet love. Captain Reed finally stepped forward, his voice small. "Sir, I didn't know." The veteran looked at him, calm and steady. "You should never judge a soldier by age," he said softly. "Sometimes the body gets old, but the courage does not." Reed lowered his head. He had been proud, but not in the way a real soldier should be. The veteran placed his helmet on the wing of the aircraft. Then he turned to leave. He did not want applause. He did not want medals. He just wanted peace. As he walked away, something powerful happened. Every cadet on the runway stood in a straight line and saluted. Not because they were told, but because he earned it. The colonel watched him go with pride in his eyes. When the veteran reached the gate, he stopped for one last look at the base, at the A-10, at the sky he once ruled. Then he walked away quietly. A legend does not need to be loud. A legend simply leaves a story behind. And that day, every person on that airbase learned something they would never forget. Respect is not about age. Respect is about what a soldier carries in his heart. The end. The end.